It is early here on Monday morning. This is a 2 a.m. advisory on Hurricane Erin, and yes, it is moving towards the north and west at 12 miles per hour. It did re-intensify here late on Sunday after an eyewall replacement cycle back up to a Category 4 hurricane. That was expected after a little bit of weakening here. At this time, though, it is still impacting places like northern Hispaniola, even out towards the Turks and Caicos. A tropical storm warning is in place at this time as our storm system continues to near there. And in fact, you can take a look at that low level center, kind of getting that energy back within there. That is where the core of those destructive winds are. As far as the wind field, though, it does expand out over a wide area with those tropical storm strength winds. And that's why, out towards the Turk and Caicos, even though this is not going to be making landfall, you do have those warnings in place. Not to mention across Hispaniola, over towards Puerto Rico, flood warning still in place at this time due to those rain bands continuing to wrap into this storm system. So here's a look at your latest warnings. As I mentioned out here, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these get extended out towards the Bahamas and even for the east coast of the United States, specifically the Outer Banks. The mandatory evacuation has been put in place due to large waves that are going to be in the forecast that could be washing out some of the roadways there. So if you are out there in eastern areas of North Carolina, specifically, yes, the Outer Banks, that is not unusual even for storms that are passing offshore, though, and especially with this one, with its large wind field, it is going to have some massive waves coming in out of it. So why is it moving towards the north? I'm sure you've seen this graphic plenty of times. Just to reiterate, not just to regurgitate the spaghetti models or anything like that, just a simple meteorological explanation. We have this high pressure ridge over the southeast, the Bermuda High off towards the east. This is threading the needle between those and kind of basically busting through and allowing it to track off towards the north. So taking a look at one of your models here, and basically you have this pushing well towards the east of Florida by about 400 to 500 miles. We said it would actually pass east of Florida by about 400 to 500 miles about 6 days ago. So this track is, despite what you're seeing online, spot on at this point. The issue, though, is going to be that long fetch area, those winds wrapping around just like that, and that is going to be pushing those waves, pushing those waters onshore, and that's going to increase the risk of rip currents for starters, but also just massive waves with breakers that could be up to 7 to 8 feet, even 9 feet at times for parts of the first coast and along the eastern coast of Florida, and even larger once it gets further towards the north into the Outer Banks. And here's a look at that wind field I was talking about. And that's going to be one of the big things because waves get bigger the more the wind pushes over the waves. It's not just direct correlation of the wind at one specific point, but it's all about the fetch area. And you can see with that wind field expanding, that is also going to increase the swells out here. Now, could we see some gusty conditions as well for the Outer Banks? For sure. Maybe some tropical storm strength gust, especially with some of these stronger bands that push through. They could have been looking at some severe thunderstorms coming out of it. But I think, once again, the reason for that evacuation and the reason why we're talking about life-threatening rip currents out here is the waves. That is the key thing for the east coast of the United States with this storm system. It is expected that core of those 130 mile per hour winds at this time are expected to pass well offshore. So what's the risk for the first coast? This is first coast news. You can see that on top of all the graphics, right? High risk of rip currents, high surf as well, up to 7 feet or greater. We also have a spring tide. If you go out early in the morning, you can see that waning moon, a crescent moon that is heading towards a new moon. So naturally, tides go up around that point, and then you're talking about that flood potential there too, minor tidal flooding and even moderate beach erosion as well in our forecast. So big waves, dangerous rip currents. If you are in Jacksonville and you don't head out to the ocean, you're probably going to not notice the impacts from this. But if you do live in one of those low-lying kind of flood-prone areas, you could be looking at some water level rises here. And if you're heading out to the beach, just don't go in the water. It is going to be sketchy. All right, so we have the latest update. It's actually not a 40. It was upgraded to a 50% chance of tropical development. This wave coming off the west coast of Africa. That is the next one. Now, I know there's a lot of people sharing models out there. And I can say right off the bat, yeah, I could train a first grader to kind of share a model, but knowing the meteorological reasoning behind it and kind of showing the difference models and giving you an explanation, is what we're here for, to kind of explain to you. So not trying to give you BS here, not trying to hype it. Let's explain what we're seeing. So this looks like it's going to track in a very similar path as Erin, basically rounding the Bermuda high. Also good news is Erin's done a lot of upwelling, so there's some cooler sea surface temperatures under it compared to Erin, and we have Saharan dust to deal with. So the guidance is really kind of showing a weaker storm versus when Erin was first developing. It was very aggressive on some of those long-range models. Now, as this pushes towards the Caribbean, though, there is still some uncertainty. Let's be frank. The extended outlook, if somebody says, hey, this is going to hit your home in the Gulf, no, tell them to lay off of the sauce here, and let's come back and revisit this. This is actually the European versus the GFS, and this is something they may not be showing you. There's the GFS there, there's the Euro there, both showing kind of a weak storm, but both taking two vastly different tracks as well. And this is why we're saying that long-range forecast, definitely uncertainty. You have to wait until the more near term. And if we talk about near term, specifically with Erin, this is the 5-day outlook, and each one of the advisories have been within the cone of air. And overall, that forecast projection showing that turn towards the north. In fact, if you look at my updates from this time last week, it was showing a very similar path to what we have at this time. This passing just east of the Outer Banks, about 500 miles east of Florida. Storm's not over yet, though. Okay, and we're going to continue to monitor out here, so be sure to check out firstcoastnews.com/Hurricane Central. Got plenty more stuff there, and always streaming with new updates. And I'll be here all morning on Good Morning Jacksonville if you want to stop by and see the latest information.